Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today is day 39 of the Geography GCSE countdown, and today we are thinking about fluvial or river processes. So what are the processes of erosion? There is very little water in the Exmoor. This picture shows a small river on Exmoor in southwest England. There is very little water in the river, very little is happening. It is like this for much of the year. The river is using all of its energy to overcome friction and just transport water downstream. It is only after heavy rainfall that the river has enough energy to erode and enlarge its channel and the river valley. It is possible to identify two types of erosion. Firstly, vertical erosion, which is up and down, so downwards erosion, vertical is downwards, and lateral erosion, which is sideways. These combine to cause downstream changes to the river channel and the river valley, described in yesterday's video. So in the upper course there is mostly erosion going on, for example waterfalls. In the middle course there is mostly erosion and there's depositional landforms such as meanders and transportation, and then in the lower course there is mostly depositional landforms such as levees. There is erosional processes such as hydraulic action, solution, attrition and abrasion happening, and there is also transportation through solution, which is a dissolved load, suspension, which is small sediment that is held in the river and carried along. There is saltation, which is a bouncing of particles that are too heavy to be suspended in the river, and there is traction, where large particles are rolled along the riverbed rather than bounced, they're rolled. And then there is deposition. This is where sediment is deposited on the bed and the banks of the river at the mouth, where the velocity of the water falls. Hydraulic action is one of our erosional processes. The force of the water hitting the riverbed and banks. This is most effective when the water is moving fast and when there is a lot in it, and when there is a lot of water there. Abrasion is where the load is carried by the river repeatedly, hitting the bed or banks, dislodging particles into the flow of water. Attrition is where stones carried by the river knock against each other and are gradually grounded, making the stones smaller and more rounded. And then solution. This is where the river flows over limestone or chalk and the rock is slowly dissolved. This is because it becomes soluble in mildly acidic river water. But what are the processes of transportation? The material transported by a river is called its load. There are four main types of transportation that occur in a river: traction, saltation, suspension and solution. So traction is the rolling, saltation is the bouncing on the riverbed, suspension is the carrying of small loads, and the solution is when it's dissolved in the water. The size and total amount of load that can be carried will depend on the river's rate of flow, its velocity. After a rainstorm, rivers often look very muddy because they are flowing fast and transporting large amounts of sediment. At low flow, when rivers are usually clearer, very little sediment is being transported. But when does deposition take place? Deposition occurs when the velocity of a river decreases. It no longer has enough energy to transport its sediment, and so it is deposited. Larger rocks tend to be deposited in the upper course of a river. They are only transported for very short distances, mostly by traction, this rolling, during periods of very high flow. Finer sediment is carried further downstream, mostly held in suspension, this floating. This material will be deposited on the riverbed or banks, where velocity is slowed by friction. And a large amount of deposition occurs at the river mouth, where the interaction with tides, along with a very gentle gradient, greatly reduces the river's velocity. So the question outlined two processes of fluvial river erosion. So we're going to think about either hydraulic action, abrasion, attrition or solution, and you can explain what they are. So I hope this has been useful. Do subscribe down below if it has been, and I will see you at 7 AM tomorrow. Bye guys.